In today's video, I'm going to be talking about the problem of having too much time. You guys are probably familiar with the saying that idle hands are the devil's playground. And what that means is that when you're not doing anything with your hands, right, that just gives room for the devil to creep in, right? And so I'm sure you guys have probably noticed in your lives, just like how I've noticed in my life, that when I'm busy and focused on something, then I'm less likely to fall into temptation. But when I'm just lounging around, scrolling through apps, binge watching a show, or just taking a chill day, not really doing much, the devil doesn't have any new tricks. And one of his best tricks is deception, right? And a lot of times when we fall short, we end up justifying the action. We come up with reasons why it's okay. And so we sin alone, right, but heal together. We made a video about that a long time ago. And when you're by yourself, it's a lot easier to sin, it's a lot easier to justify, and it's a lot easier to be deceived by the devil. So the important thing here is that we remain busy and focused on what's most important. If you guys find value in this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. And so I'm going to be talking about Samuel chapter 11, and it's probably one of the most well-known stories of failure in the Bible. Starting off in verse 1, it says, "In the spring, at the time when kings go off to war, David sent Joab out with the king's men and the whole Israelite army, but David remained in Jerusalem." So back in this time, when there was a war, the king was supposed to be leading and out there with his guys, right, fighting, but he decides to stay back and he sends Joab out. For those of you who aren't familiar with David, we're talking about David versus Goliath here, right? So he was a guy who had been chosen and anointed by God to be a king as a young shepherd boy. Obviously, he was the one to take down Goliath when no one else had the courage to face him. And in 1 Samuel chapter 13, verse 14, it says that he was known as a man after God's own heart. So David becomes king, right? Things are good. He has wealth, power, God's favor. He's sitting on top of the mountain, right? After he becomes king, he unites Israel, establishes Jerusalem as its capital. He expands their territory, strengthens their military. Again, he's the man, right? He's the king. But what we see happen here is that he gets too comfortable. Just like a lot of times today when we see people that may look like they have it all and they take their foot off the gas, or they get easily distracted by something that they shouldn't have been. And now all of a sudden, snap of the finger, thing changes, their life changes completely, right? This is what we see happen here to David. So in verses 2 through 5, King David's at home. He sees this beautiful girl, just like when you're at home, maybe you're on the apps on Instagram and you're scrolling through, you see a pretty girl, click the link, and now all of a sudden you have that thought, right? And that thought initiates a feeling, and that feeling initiates an action. And this is what we see happen here. So David has the thought, and then he has the feeling, and then he goes out and acts on this and sleeps with another man's wife, one of his elite warrior's wives, and then impregnates her. So again, to kind of highlight here how idleness opens the door, he wasn't busy with purpose. He wasn't busy with anything. His guys were out fighting. He was back home. He had too much comfort and free time. And instead of seeking God or leading his people, he was seeking pleasure. In Proverbs chapter 14, verse 12, it says, "There's a way that appears to be right, but in the end it leads to death," right? So that feeling, that thought, that feeling, that action, right, that we pursue, it feels right in that time, but in the end, it leads to death, right? So what it's telling us is that we may feel a certain way, that we want to go act on it, but when we act on what the flesh wants, it leads to death. Then when we go on to verse 6 through 13, it's basically the cover-up. So after finding out that Bathsheba was pregnant, he tries to cover it up. He calls Uriah back from battle and told him to go to his wife, hoping that he would obviously sleep with her so the child would look like it's Uriah's. But Uriah was a stand-up guy. He refused to come home while his guys were out there fighting. He stayed out in the battlefield. And so David then tried to get Uriah drunk, but even then, Uriah refused to sleep with his wife. And so when that plan doesn't work, now we're going to verses 14 through 17, he sends Uriah back to the battlefield with a letter, instructing Joab to place Uriah on the front lines and pull back so he'd be killed. And then Uriah was killed in battle. So David's decision, King David's decision, and again, this is how our lives, or how we see people's lives, spiral completely out of control just off of, it's never just off of one decision, but it's that initial decision that's a little bit off the course, right? And then it just kind of compounds and snowballs into something greater, right? So David, again, doesn't go off to war with these guys. He stays back. Not that big of a deal. Or it doesn't seem like it's that big of a deal. Now all of a sudden he sees this pretty woman. He knows she's married. He still sends guys out to bring her back. He sleeps with her. He gets her pregnant. And again, this is just the compound spiral out of control effect, like it happens in a lot of people's lives. It's, again, that initial decision that's a little bit off course that completely derails the train of where it's supposed to go, right? So this is what we see happen to David here. And so he impregnates Uriah's wife, tries to get Uriah back home and sleep with his wife so that it looks like it's his kid. Uriah refuses. And so now David has one of his guys killed. He tells Joab to pull back and basically put Uriah out in the front lines of war so that he can get killed. And so just to reiterate, David's failure wasn't random. Just like when we fall short, it's not random. A lot of times we're by ourselves, just like David was by himself. We have too much time on our hands, just like David had here. We become too comfortable with how things are, right? We take our foot off the gas a little bit. We're easily distracted by, that new shiny object, right? So instead of staying focused in our lane, we're, looking all over the place and, interested and distracted by these things in our lives. We're deceived by what looks pretty, by what looks good, by what feels good. But again, what it says in the Bible is that what feels good now results in death. What our body wants now results in death. And so wanted to share this message with everybody because of how important it is to remain busy and focused on what's most important. Again, if you guys found value in this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and share it with a friend. Thank you guys for watching. We appreciate your time.